Israel's had problems with Iran for a very long time. They've wanted a war with them because Iran is the only country really that stands in Israel's way of controlling the Middle East. Israel is a nuclear superpower. They stole those nuclear weapons from us, but that's a whole other conversation. And basically, Iran was having discussions with the United States about a nuclear deal, very similar to what Obama had back in roughly 2015. And they were having rounds of meetings. Basically, the United States was saying you can't have any type of uranium enrichment because they did have a nuclear program, which was a civilian and, for energy purposes. And the United States, with a lot of pressure from Israel, was saying, you can't have any type of nuclear program. And this is kind of where they've had the red line. And we've kind of been going back and forth on that. And the deadline was, I think, yesterday. It just hit today. Yeah. So the deadline to come to an agreement was yesterday. And then there was also some inspections that were being done. But the long story short is Israel kind of jumped the gun. We're supposed to meet with with Iran again for the nuclear discussion. And Israel decided to bomb them today. They've launched 300 plus strikes at this point. They've killed a bunch of military leaders. They've killed nuclear scientists. And, there's no way that Iran isn't going to retaliate very hard against Israel. They have a very strong ballistic missile program. So they're going to absolutely hit Israel hard. And that's going to drag us into the conflict, despite the fact that mainstream media is trying to say that we're not going to get involved. We're going to have to get involved to protect Israel because, they always do this. They bite off more than they can chew. And we're going to have to come in and ensure they don't get destroyed by Iran.
Let me ask you a question. Why are we so, and I've always asked this question, and nobody's ever been able to really give me some concrete insight into why we have such a strong relationship and partnership and that we support Israel the way that we do.
Yeah, I'll give the politically correct version of this because I know we're on YouTube. The long story short is they buy our politicians. They have a huge lobbying organization. They're the only foreign country really that can lobby to the level that they do. All of our politicians basically in real positions of power are paid off. They get support from AIPAC. And whenever they pass legislation, whether Democrat or Republican, they're always passing bills that benefit Israel because in every single infrastructure in American society, they have control to some degree, whether it's the media, it's Hollywood, it's social media platforms. There's an enormous amount of control, politics, law enforcement. They're in every, crevice of American society with influential positions. And that allows them to kind of use that influence for the betterment of Israel. We got some government employees held that have dual allegiance with 2 passports. So this is something that, is a very serious problem. A lot of Americans aren't familiar with it. But our foreign policy is basically controlled through Israel and their deep pockets and their lobby.
There you go.
My crickets button won't work.
Well, there's more to it than just that. But, obviously I'm giving like the more, concise version that's a bit easier to digest. But it goes back a long time, right? We can go back to the Kennedy era. The last president that stood up to the Israel lobby was John F. Kennedy, and he got his head blown out for that. So,
I had to run to the door real quick. So basically what you're saying is that a lot of it is just tied. The politically correct answer is a lot of it is tied to our relationship politically as far as the different individuals with Israel.
Yeah. Some of the most influential people in American society are hardcore Zionists, right? I mean, we could talk about like Donald Trump, for example. He's received somewhere around $200+ million from a woman named Miriam Adelson. Miriam Adelson is the wife of casino tycoon Sheldon Adelson. And they're like the #1 Republican donors, right? And one of the big things is that when they donate money, they're like, hey, this money, we need you to, have Israel in your interest whenever you, pass legislation, right? You look at these anti-Semitism bills where they have these students getting picked up at colleges for writing op-eds or they're stopping these protests or whatever. The only reason that they're passed these anti-Semitism bills is because we have a very strong Zionist lobby in America. So, they're basically infringing on our First Amendment rights of freedom of speech to protect the foreign nation. So, and obviously like this discussion prior to October 7th was something that would get you in trouble. Now that, it's more out there in the mainstream, which is a good thing. You can have these discussions now, but it's been a fifth column that people haven't been aware of for a very long time in America. That we are occupied by a foreign nation that runs our foreign policy, especially in the Middle East. And what we're seeing going on right now with the bombing of Iran is, the final form, right? They've been trying to have this war for 40 plus years and attack Iran.
So you think that the United States of America is essentially going to be dragged? Do you think that we'll be dragged in physically, or do you think it's more going to be a proxy war, whereas we kind of support Israel in the same way that we kind of support Ukraine?
We're going to have to come in a more direct fashion. And the reason why is because we have a much stronger link to Israel than we do to Ukraine. Ukraine is kind of like a puppet government that does what we want. But when it comes to Israel, they actually have real donors and real backers that are, dual citizens. So the problem with Israel is that it's propped up by the United States, and it only exists because of the United States. If it were not for the United States and our protection and all the aid that we give them every year, they would be overtaken by the Arab world within a few days. Right. So we are going to have to come in at some point and help them, because they will not be able to actually defend themselves against Iran's ballistic missile program at all. They have hypersonic missiles and the Iron Dome can't stop that. If
you had to guess, do you think that this strike on Iran and its military leaders were authorized? Just guessing, obviously, because we don't necessarily have any real intelligence.
Sure.
Or maybe some hasn't been released as far as what they would want us to know yet. If you had to guess, do you think that this is something that was authorized by the United States of America, or this is something that they was doing on their own?
So I literally just got a news report on Twitter. So Trump knew it was happening. That's why he pulled employees out of the Middle East area, I think embassy employees. But I don't think he wanted it to happen, because they were right in the middle of talks. They were supposed to meet on Sunday, right? On the, sixth meeting for this uranium enrichment. So I think he knew it was going to happen, but I don't think he wanted it to happen as quickly as it did. I think he wanted some more time to try to, take the route of diplomacy, right? But now I think we've crossed the bridge we can't return. We went too far, because at this they've killed military generals. They've attacked some of their nuclear facilities. They've done precise strikes, 300 plus. So I don't even think diplomacy is an option anymore for the United States at this point.
Well, the reason that I asked that, and obviously I know that Trump seems to be more of a businessman. Obviously, he doesn't advocate for war. He's largely been a president that has been against starting new wars.
Yeah.
The reason that I say that is because we were in direct conversations with Iran, especially with regard to their whole nuclear program and stuff like that. But is it a possibility, that maybe the negotiations weren't going as well as we thought that they were, which then in turn could play into one of the reasons why things played out the way that it did.
Yeah, no, they definitely did hit some roadblocks. Oh, sorry. Camera turn off. They definitely did hit some roadblocks, especially when it comes to uranium enrichment. Like the United States was saying they can't enrich uranium, and they're saying like, no, we need to enrich uranium because obviously by international law, they have the right to do so. And they understand that if they give up their nuclear program, it's going to put them in a very vulnerable position with Israel. And, they kind of learned from other people. They learned from Saddam Hussein back in the 80s. He got bombed to hell because he didn't have a nuclear program. They watched Gaddafi give up their nuclear program and get overthrown in 10 years. So Iran has been there the whole time and watched as the United States and Israel systematically destabilize the entire Middle East. So they understand that by getting rid of their nuclear program, it puts them in a very weak position, because Iran is what's called like a threshold state. So they have a space program which they, allows them to launch rockets, and they also have a nuclear program that's civilian. But if they need to, many military analysts have pretty much figured out that Iran could develop a nuclear warhead, a crude one, within a couple of weeks. So that's kind of where we're at now. But the United States is trying to say, well, we don't even want you to be enriching. And for Iran, that was a red line. They need to be able to enrich in their eyes for their personal security.
Last question, unless somebody else got any other questions. What role do you think that the rest of the world, whether it be United States of America's adversaries or their allies, what kind of position does this strike put them in? If you was able to speak on that, because I know it kind of puts the United States of America in a very difficult position, even if we know or we don't know, because we are an ally of Israel. How do you think that this plays out as far as other allies or adversaries?
It's going to put us in a very bad spot. It's going to put the UK in a bad spot. There's a reason why the United States and the UK refuses to call what's going on in Gaza a genocide, because obviously, right, we give them a lot of the weapons and support. So it's going to put the allies in a weird position too, because when Iran, and this happened actually last year. So, Israel's trying to instigate a war last year in a very similar way. And what ended up happening was Iran told Israel, we are going to retaliate against you. And they actually launched a bunch of drones and missiles into Israel, and they were actually able to successfully penetrate. And, we had to immobilize the aircraft carrier. Jordan had to get involved to help. Egypt, the UK, a bunch of these countries had to come in and assist. So when Iran attacks, a lot of people have to come in and assist them because, they have and that wasn't even their best stuff that they used. So we're absolutely going to get dragged in. Other allies are going to get dragged in because once Iran starts launching real missiles at them, it's going to be pretty bad.
Does anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, I do. How long do you think before Gab is taken down? And how many anti-Semitic rules will the U.S. Be incentivized to create once that war starts? Well, once they join in on that, if they join in on that war.
Yeah. They've already started, right? So they started kind of with the college students. I'm sure you guys heard of the, Mahmoud Khalil. He ended up getting arrested for leading the protest last year. And,
that was at Columbia, right?
Yeah, that was exactly. Yep. At Columbia, they've really been going at the college campuses because the college campuses are kind of the forefront of the rebellion of, the conflict in Gaza, what's going on. So Israel understands that without American support, they can't really wage this war effectively. So what they've been able to do is pass legislation to effectively silence individuals that are critical of Israel that aren't American citizens. And what I predict they're going to do is they're going to try to escalate this. So you guys can look this up. Something called Project Esther. This is something that was put out by the Heritage Foundation last year, where what it would basically do is, is they had like an entire game plan of how they would combat anti-Semitism in America or criticism of Israel or Zionism, right? And they try to conflate the two, right, for the purposes of silencing you. And I think as the conflict heightens up and there's more and more disdain for the conflict with more U.S. involvement, I predict that there is going to be legislation passed. We know that a bunch of governors have already passed, anti-Semitism bills in their states, like Kristi Noem, for example, the Secretary of Homeland Security. She passed anti-Semitism bill in the Dakotas, where the very small Jewish population. So I predict as the conflict heats up and the U.S. gets involved, I definitely anticipate that there might be legislation pushed because they've been able to prove that it works with the students that are foreign nationals. So I have no doubt in my mind that they're going to try to push that onto U.S. citizens in the future as well.
You think they're gonna shut down Gap?
Gap, the clothing company?
Gap, no, Gap, the app, Gap.
The Twitter.
The clothing.
Yeah, I was like, hey, Gap, the clothing company? No, Gab. Gab is like more free speech. I mean, X is too. But I know the guy. I think it's Andrew Torba that runs Gap. Yeah, he's very critical of Israel too. So we'll see, man. But They've definitely been passing laws. And the thing that worries me the most, and I think every American should be aware of this, right? The current definition of anti-Semitism is defined by something called the IHRA, or the International Holocaust Remembrance Association. And this definition changes. It's an international agency first, and the definition changes based on whatever they deem to be anti-Semitic. They call it the hate that mutates. So they reserve the right to change that definition at any time to appeal to whatever political agenda they have. And I think for anyone that is an American, they need to be aware of this, that this could be the beginning of infringing on the First Amendment and freedom of speech, because this definition of anti-Semitism can change at any time based on the IHRA's definition.
Okay, so to piggyback off that a little bit, if this does in fact turn into World War III, what do you think the average American can look to see as an impact on their everyday lives?
We're talking about you're going to feel it at the gas pump immediately, right? So what's very important for Americans to know, right? Because I know a lot of Americans are like, oh, why do we care? Like, it's Iran and Israel. Like, what does it have to do with us? Well, it has a lot to do with us because there's a strait there, like a water pathway called the Strait of Hormuz, right? And this pathway, approximately 30% of the world's oil goes through this pathway. So if that was to get clogged up, we're talking about a gallon of gas going up to $11 at the pump. We're talking about, U.S. bases being attacked in the Gulf states, right? Our allies, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, etc. We're talking about strategic oil locations being bombed by Iran. Now, Iran can't stand up to us militarily, but what they will do is they're going to absolutely make us pay for it economically. And they'll do that by destroying strategic oil locations, military bases, and attacking our allies. So that is kind of how they've been able to operate for all these decades without being attacked, despite the fact that they don't have a nuclear weapon. But they're absolutely going to try to make one now that they're being attacked. And they do have the capability of enriching to weapons grade within a few weeks.
I got a question. Do you think Donald Trump really wants to go against Israel, or do you think he's in on it? Because I get two sides of it. Like one minute it seems like he has to do what AIPAC says, and then the other minute he's trying to push back.
Yeah. Well, I can definitely answer this because I know a lot of people criticize Trump for being, super pro-Israel and very pro-Zionist. I think it's very important that people don't forget that just last year, Donald Trump was looking at going to jail for the rest of his life. He had been indicted in 4 different jurisdictions. He had a federal case out of Florida. He had a federal case out of D.C. He had a state case out of Atlanta. He had a state case out of New York. So they were absolutely going to try to bury him and put him in prison for the rest of his life. Had he not won this election, he would be in prison right now. So, you get someone like Mira Madelson come in and say, look, we're gonna push you up. We're going to get you in, right? And, a lot of these tech bros, Elon Musk, Bill Ackman, Peter Thiel, these tech bros that typically were Democrats and liberals, they come and surround Trump. And he's like, well, what am I going to do? Do I have to kind of compromise myself and play the game so I stay out of jail? Or am I going to go ahead and not take the money? Obviously, it was a do or die situation. So those people put him in power, kept him out of jail. So he does have some semblance of, doing what they ask. Obviously, he's been trying to fight back against it, because he's trying to have diplomacy with Iran. But at the end of the day, the Zionist lobby in America is incredibly powerful, incredibly influential. It's almost impossible to get into American politics without having some type of AIPAC influence or backing. So, I think part of him is like, I don't want to go to war because he doesn't want to be as the president that, went to war. We saw that destroy Bush's legacy, because no one can ever remember anything good that Bush did. They just remember Iraq war and how much of a failure that was. But on the other hand, he understands that, the Israelis are the ones that really put him in. The Zionist lobby put him in position. This is why people that are like in the tech world that were career Democrats came around and supported Trump because they knew that he was going to be far more pro-Israel than Kamala Harris.